Hello there, and welcome back to another Bo&Joe podcast. I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And we want to welcome everybody back. For us, this is our first session after the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
I myself took a 2-week vacation right around the Christmas time, and Joe, you took one after New Year's.
Yeah.
And you went to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
All right, well, welcome back.
Yeah.
And,
good to be back.
For our topic tonight, I wanted to kind of re-ingratiate you back into our fold with a topic that I think I'm pretty sure you like.
Yeah.
Let's talk about pyramids.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yes.
All right, so, weird question. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite pyramid?
So, it's a good question, and I think the Great Pyramid of Giza has to be my favorite, but it's mostly primarily due to the mystery behind it.
The mystery behind it? What do you mean?
So, like, something that we've been talking offline about is that primarily almost anybody that has a basic knowledge of pyramids, for the most part, think that everything's been figured out. Realistically, nothing really has been figured out about the Great Pyramid of Egypt.
I agree, yeah. So, that much I think we can agree on.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories, yes. But is there any type of concise evidence towards how it was built, why it was built, what's it for? Nope.
Oh, quick segue for our listeners. As most of you know, we live up in the mountains of Colorado. Mm-hmm. It is... it's almost single-digit temperature out there.
Yeah.
And so that noise, that soft hum you hear in the background, that's our heater, because we don't want to freeze to death. I mean, right now.
Yeah. Maybe later.
Maybe later. So if you hear a noise in the background, that's what it is. That's us trying not to become snowmen.
Yep.
Just want to make sure everybody knew.
Yeah, we're going to be frozen mummies.
Yeah, well, be a frozen ditty. So anyway, I wanted to talk about pyramids because I think not only is it a subject we could probably talk about for hours, mm-hmm. and we have in the past.
Oh, yeah.
But I also want to make sure that those who are listening to us get a better understanding, for those who don't already have it, mm-hmm. of what really the pyramids are. Mm-hmm. So, by default, I think most of us are taught in school that the pyramids were tombs.
Right.
They were tombs for the great pharaohs and some of his family, mm-hmm. and I think in the most recent years we've seen that is largely disproven.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, to my understanding, and by all means correct me if I'm wrong here, mm-hmm. only one body has ever been found in a pyramid.
I believe you're right. And even if you look at, in Egypt particularly, if you look at the Valley of the Kings, where most of the pharaohs and very important people are laid to rest,
yeah.
Right? It's totally different. I mean, you see there's incredibly ornate. You see hieroglyphs everywhere. You see a variety of things, not just treasures, but just an amalgamation of stuff, basically, that's in there for the afterlife, right? Because one of the biggest things for them is that they believed, right, that this afterlife they would physically need all these things, and sometimes even people.
Right.
So you see a huge difference. So again, yes, you're right. And not just that, but we can definitely see that there's a huge difference into what we see in the actual burial places of holy people, pharaohs and such, in just Egypt itself. And if we go to other places on the planet that have pyramids, most of them are either considered temples or I think primarily in my 2 cents about it is, if anything, they could be a ways of hiding knowledge. And by that I mean the physical structure itself might have information that could help a person that's such inclined that wants to understand what it means, like geometry and a bunch of other things that are inlaid into the actual physical construction of the body.
Sure.
So maybe that makes more sense than just a tomb, because I mean realistically, there's almost no evidence, like you said, that any of those, especially in Egypt, were used for what they're said to be. Like, there's this guy called Robert Bobal, right? You probably ran into that guy,
sure,
right?
Sure.
So he...
I mean, not personally, but during research, yeah.
I mean, you never know.
I had lunch with him Tuesday.
There you go, see?
He's
a funny guy.
We were at Hooters.
Wow, that's a segue.
Wait, what? No. You're right, and I think you brought up a good point. Before we get on to that fellow, there's a lot that could be said. I wanted to touch on something you mentioned that I don't think a lot of our audience will know. Mm-hmm. So the pyramids of Giza, the pyramids, and then the Great Pyramid of Giza mm-hmm. are the most well known. I think many of our listeners probably don't realize that pyramids have been found all over the world.
Yeah.
And I don't mean semblances of pyramids. I mean actual pyramids.
Yeah.
So we know that there's one. Is it Turkey? I'm thinking of.
There's
the big grass one. Or was it Hungary?
No. That's the one that's. It's I forgot exactly the place, but that one hasn't been completely 100% vetted as a pyramid. But yes, there is one that's gargantuan. It's supposedly the biggest, if it is actually a pyramid.
Right.
I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, and I don't think you're far off.
It's either Turkey or Hungary. I know it's a food. or relevant to food. And as a fact guy, I know my food. But I know that that's one. I know that they found several in China.
Yes, they have.
And they of course. You could count some of the lost cities of Mexico technically as pyramids.
Well, no. They're full-fledged pyramids, man. Like,
I was talking about like.
You mean the lost ones?
Yeah,
like the ones that have recently been found? You mean?
No, I'm talking about. I'm going to butcher the word.
Yeah.
Teotihuacan. That one.
Yeah.
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Teotihuacan. That's exactly what I said. I don't know what you heard, but yeah, it was very but no, like that technically is a pyramid.
Did you know that the pyramid of the sun is the exact same dimensions in its scale, in the footprint as the Great Pyramid of Giza?
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. For me, and I'm speaking possibly out of turn before we get into some of the details of it, but for me, even as a child, when I saw the pyramids, like anybody, I was like, that's amazing. I wonder what that's about. And then I saw the place that I've said the name of correctly 6 times now. I've seen their structures, and I'm like, wait, that's just a redefined pyramid. And this is, they're not like they're within walking distance.
No.
It's not like they're neighbors. But I see this, and I think, how did... And that's really 2 separate time frames.
Yeah.
Like how does a scientist, and this is me as a child, mind you.
Yeah.
How does a scientist explain that? How does that work? And as a child growing up, I don't know what you heard in Puerto Rico, but for me, when I did ask this, it was migration. Yeah. So it was somebody from Egypt traveled and said, hey, you could have better houses if you built this.
Yeah, pyramids is a thing.
Yeah, pyramid is... I have the schematic in my pocket, if you're interested.
Do you like snake oil?
Exactly. Just don't have any gold, because that could be bad.
Yeah, run.
But, no, so I always thought it was weird that there's so many different variations of pyramid. It's not exactly intuitive. When I think myself, and this is... trying to throw out any knowledge I have currently of like geometric shapes or anything. Yeah. If I'm going to build a structure, like I'm out in the wild and I want to build a structure that's going to last through wind and whatnot, I don't think pyramid. Right. So why would a whole generation of people, a whole civilization, why would you think pyramid? Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, first off, pyramids showing up in other places in the world? Yeah. And then pyramids being so, let's go with widely accepted amongst different nationalities. Well,
I mean, if anything, we know one thing's for sure. They were of huge importance. Because if you think about it, that's a great undertaking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, at this point in time, what is classically believed is that it took 20 years, which is... mind-bogglingly wrong. I believe I don't even understand. I mean, you're talking about you'd have to move a block that weighed up to 20 tons a minute to be able to reach those 20 years. So I honestly don't even know how. We're basically just talking about the Great Pyramid of Egypt, of Giza, the Khufu. Yeah.
And then that's also with the theory that a lot of people still believe is that it was done with slaves.
Exactly.
Which we know is not true.
Exactly. And so good point. But so the whole idea of this just the fallacy of what we've been taught and the construction of it with the purpose of it.
You said fallacy.
I mean, it is though. It is totally a fallacy. And no, but seriously, like I honestly think that they have to have been of great importance because not only, as you said, that the civilization of South America, Mesoamerica, and much other, even to my surprise, in North America, there's some pyramid-like structures.
Yeah, I've seen some smaller ones. But
but still, I mean, you see that kind of taper everywhere in the world, and you mentioned a couple of them, and it's amazing. Like, it's something that you cannot just put a thumb on and say, nah, it's just tombs.
Was it Bosnia?
Yes, Bosnia.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt
The
train of
Bosnian
thought.
pyramid.
The
You're
Bosnian
right.
Pyramid,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wrong. It wasn't about food, and I failed as a fat man.
Maybe you wanted booze. I don't know. Bosnian.
Bos-
I don't know.
That is terrible. That's not even remotely close.
Now we're both wrong. See?
Yeah, but you're more wrong than me. So-
That tends to be the case.
Yes, you're right. That's what I'm gonna go with. But no, yeah, the Bosnian pyramid. So it had nothing to do with Turkey or Hungary or chicken.
Yeah, it's all right. It's Bosnian, but
Yeah, so I don't know why that just came to me as I'm sitting there listening to you talk. It's like, oh, Bosnia.
but that one hasn't been vetted out yet, so the jury's still out.
I mean, but hasn't it though?
No.
So they. I know for a long time that, and your boy
Graham,
Graham.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to say Peterson, but that's a whole different guy.
whole different dude.
Yeah, just thinking of the great men that we know.
Yeah, but they're both well spoken.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be interesting to see them talk, but they wouldn't be able. Like, they're not in the same. Same genre, so
maybe he would psychoanalyze Hancock a lot.
Yeah, but I don't think Hancock would give a damn.
They just do a bunch of DMT together, probably.
Yeah. But no, so your boy Hancock, Graham Hancock, tried for a while to get into the Bosnian pyramid, and I don't know if he ever did, but I did hear of a survey crew that went in there, and what they found in it was pretty much the same thing that just got made public about the Great Pyramid, was the energy manipulation.
Oh, yeah, the vortex stuff.
Yeah, right, the energy vortex.
Which is another important thing to note.
Absolutely. And well, there's so much to get to.
Yeah.
You know, I think for starting thing, I wanted to make sure our audience knows the pyramids are not alone.
Oh, yeah.
Which sounds weird to say.
Hey, man, X-Files.
Yeah, exactly. Or Triangle Files. I don't know. So, but no, the pyramids are not alone, at least not in Egypt. I've seen the ones in China, and they are like every other pyramid in the world. So those are the only pyramids that are not covered.
Well, and the interesting thing about the Chinese ones, it's illegal to see them, to actually investigate them.
Oh yeah, I mean that's true of almost all their
but
their landmarks.
It's kind of, it's a very interesting scenario, because back when they were originally discovered, the farmers around those areas that had land, that were tilling the land, were told to actually grow foliage and trees and such in those structures, so as to hide them. Seriously.
Wonder why.
I don't know. It's weird. I honestly don't know why.
What would be the reason? I mean, think about it. Just abstractly. Obviously, I don't expect you to have an answer.
Yeah.
What would be a reason for a government to say cover this up?
Well, okay, so I didn't want to jump ahead, but I have a little bit of information that I think almost nobody's heard before in regards to pyramids, in regards to the Great Pyramid, in regards to things that have been hidden. So, in order to answer your question, let's first think of something more home-based, or more towards what we know. So, primarily, we are told that nothing was found in the Great Pyramid of Giza, right? And I'm going to get to answering your question. I just wanted to tell you this because it ties into it. So so that's not true. So there was something that was found in the Great Pyramid
of of Giza.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's two instances of this. So you know how important it is to find organic material in order to be able to do dates, right?
Sure.
So there were two things that were found, and some of these were lost and then were found thanks to Bobal. Robert Bobal was the guy who found one of them. So there was a obsidian ball, and there was these weird hook thing, and apart from that, there was a piece of wood. So the wood apparently was supposedly utilized for a measurement of some sorts. So what's interesting is all of these things were carried over by this person who carried them for 30, 40 years in his family, from one generation to the other one. And this Babal character traced where these things went to, and they ended up hitting the British Museum. So the last bit of this information ended in the British Museum. You can still see the ball, which I'm sorry, it's not.
You shouldn't make that motion.
It's So the ball is not. It's not obsidian. It's dolomite, I think.
Okay.
It's a dolomite ball.
That's kind of a big difference.
Yeah. Sorry. And then the other piece, but the important bit is the wood. Guess what? The wood disappeared. So, to your point, why would you hide that? So, Sayo was the guy who...
I was sitting there trying to think of the guy that Bobal had huge issues with. To the point of almost fighting.
Yeah. So this was Sa'i-Hawass was the Minister of Antiquities of Egypt. He was the guy who basically said yes or nay whenever anybody asked if they wanted to do any type of research on the Great Pyramid or the Giza complex. So here's the interesting part. Not only was that found, but you know that when you see the pyramid itself, there's these two shafts going off of the king's chamber?
Sure.
So you guess what's at the end of it?
Well, as I recall, those shafts, they were... they're too thin for a person.
Yeah, but there's iron at the end of it.
At the end of it?
Yeah, so there's these two films, and you can see them, actually. You can take pictures. There's pictures of them. There's these two bits of iron, and the reason this is important is because it ties into your question about why would you hide this type of thing.
Okay.
So... and this is all in the 90s, mind you. So they find there's this group of engineers that had this little robot that got put in there because, like you said, it's very small, and that went all the way up to the top. And when it went to the top, they found this bit of iron, which at that time, almost all the iron that was believed to be capable of this people was meteoric in origin. So it came from meteors.
Okay.
Because at the time they didn't have we believe exactly
to dig into the ground.
Right? Or no, just to make iron. Exactly, they didn't have
they couldn't forge it.
Exactly. So that's what commonly believed or understood by the archaeologists is that they didn't have the knowledge in order to make that type of iron. But when they found this, they were not allowed, and I'm not kidding, Sa'i-Hawass himself did not allow them to investigate it. Because if you take that, you're able to not just do chemical analysis on it, and also the wood, you could carbon date the wood to give you a better scope of when it was actually built.
Sure.
So... to answer your question, I think there's definitely a reason why, and it primarily ties into the narrative of history. Like, if you think about it, all of these different places, all of these different pyramids tie into a narrative that we've been told, like you said, from when we were kids. And it's kind of a sad narrative because, for the most part, it's an opinion-based narrative. And yes, there's some science to it, but if you look at archaeology and you look at Egyptology is a lot closer to art history than it is to actual science, in my mind. That's just my personal opinion.
You mean the current state of it?
No, just in general. Like, it's, if you think of, like, the origins of Egyptology are people that have studied this have been ingrained with the ideas of the people that have read, right? But if you go back far enough, right? If you go back to the first person who discovered the Great Pyramid, it was a sultan in the 9th century. And this sultan, I have his name, El-Rashid Men Mamun. And I butchered that. But El-Rashid Men Mamun was the sultan. He originally, where Baghdad is today, this is the guy who found it. And this guy, when he found it, this was in the 9th century, so it was a long time ago, he found it because there's some legends that he heard, and in passing were mentioned that the whole place and the complex was built by the Shaddai, these giant people. You can measure it as giants of stature, of giants of mind. There's the translation's kind of loose, but it could be either or. It could be either like very wise people or very great, huge people. But so he followed these legends, and it actually led them to the original place of where the pyramids lie. So this guy was the one who found it.
Okay, I did not know that.
So El-Rashid Ben Mamun, when he got there, this person, they wrote a lot of and they were pretty resilient because the legend went so far as to tell them exactly where the entrance would be. And mind you, when this happened, the casing stones were still inlaid. So, as the pyramids lie now in the Great Pyramid of Giza specifically, there's no casing stones. So all those beautiful ornate casing stones that people put in like a 3D mapping so you could see what it would look like, that was actually there when this guy found it.
Okay.
So it was much more of a solid structure.
Is it suspected that he's the guy that took them?
So he was the one who spent a lot of money.
Let me pause for a moment.
Yeah.
Explain to the listeners what a casing stone is, in case they don't know.
So originally, what we see now is the blocks themselves that are about 20 tons each that make the outside structure of the pyramid itself. The casing stones were made out of I can't believe I forgot the mineral, granite. No, I forgot the mineral, but there's basically a cover. So just imagine the entire pyramid as it is today, but with a smooth face on all 8 sides. So the pyramid itself, right, had a smooth face all the way down that looked beautiful, and it was supposedly a glistening white because of the mineral that was used.
And that's what everybody, when you look in your history books and you see a smooth-looking pyramid.
Exactly.
That's right. And that was topped off by another piece.
Oh yeah. The casing stone.
They're not 100% sure what it was.
Oh, there's
an argument of So the top of the pyramid, there's an argument about what it was. It was either a crap ton of gold.
Oh, yeah.
Or a crap ton of...
I don't know.
of crystal.
Yeah. Because...
so they're not really sure which is which. Or which is accurate. I think most commonly they're depicted with gold because of what they initially thought was just opulence, right?
Right.
But I think recently they've learned that it probably was crystal because of the energy channeling that we now know the pyramids do.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories. I think you're kind of pointing more towards the machine or the generator theory.
You talking about me?
Well, I mean, no. You're alluding, right? Because I mean, I'm saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's kind of the whole point of being a crystal-like structure or something that can generate or conduct energy. Both gold and crystal could do it in one way or another.
Right.
Realistically, I don't know, but it's a good idea.
Just saying, obviously, neither one of us are ever going to know.
Yeah.
But unless we suddenly tap into the Akashic record.
Yeah.
But no. Like my personal thought on it, I definitely don't think it was a tomb, and some elements we're going to talk about here in the comment section, I think, are going to be more fantastical. But the thing I heard the most recently that makes the most sense to me is that the pyramids that were built around the world were all meant as like a shared energy.
Yeah. Like generator or capacitor,
right? Yeah. And that's why there are so many around the world. And I saw not a diagram, but I saw somebody, and I may hate myself for doing this, but it was like on not Ancient Aliens, but it was the TV show, but another show that was
similar to that,
a little more educated,
okay.
a little less guesswork, and they showed like a 3D diagram of how the pyramids that we know exist on the globe, and they did like these grid overlines.
Oh, you're talking about so they're called ley lines,
yes,
or energy lines, or dragon lines. The Chinese called them dragon lines. Yeah,
ley line and dragon line is the same thing.
Yeah,
but so no, these pyramids, they all come across these exact lines, and that if depending on how you lay them out, like it comes out to this immaculate coverage of the whole planet.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I find that I'm not a huge believer in coincidence, so I find that to be, and I'm doing air quotes here, coincidental.
Yeah. So, and the scale of it, right?
Exactly.
It's just
insane. That's not something that accidentally happens. It's like, let's have 17 different races of people build a random shape.
At different times.
Just happens to be pyramid at different times in history. And then, what do you know? They happen to all line up on these lines.
Yeah.
If this was a thing... Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%, man. That's why, personally, it's one of those huge mysteries that I think it's a misnomer that a lot of people believe that has been solved. And a long time ago, I had a very big discussion with this with a person I knew a while ago, because he was of the mind of, no, this has been figured out. This has been figured out. It was Khufu, and Khufu built it, and there's evidence of Khufu building something, and he's right. There was evidence of a huge undertaking that was taking place at the time of Khufu, but that does not mean that they were building the pyramids. It just means they were doing something. So, in my mind, it's much more of a mystery that we gave it credit for, and I think that's by design. I honestly think that, back to your question about Chinese and back to the idea of why they hide some of this information, it will challenge history in such a way that we'd have to rewrite so much that people that have spent 30 and 40 years teaching Egyptology would literally have to find a new avenue of thought.
If you'll allow me, give me a little bit of rope here to technically hang myself, I'd like to challenge that.
Okay.
China historically doesn't give a expletive deleted of what anybody else thinks.
Right.
So we know that China doesn't care. They don't respect copyright laws. They don't care about intellectual property. They don't care. Like and I don't mean to say that Chinese people are bad or have any of these things, but China as a country historically has given the middle finger to any kind of, you're not allowed to do this, right?
Right.
Why would they care about Egyptology? And so my thought process is going back to...
I get your point.
Why would China say... And this is my best at trying to do logic, common sense, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Why would China tell their people, I want you to grow vegetation so that this thing disappears?
If anything, I would say have prying eyes look away from that area. And this is me guessing, because again, I have no idea, but I'm guessing maybe they were doing something. Maybe they were doing some type of research around that area, because that's almost all of that's owned by the government. So maybe they just didn't want prying eyes to be, hey, let's investigate this. Because think about it. Once that becomes public knowledge, there's going to be a lot of people from all around the world. UNESCO is going to be, hey, another World Heritage Site. We want to be on there, and we want to start doing investigations. We still want to start digging. Maybe they just didn't want to have a bunch of people from all around the world stuck in that area for a particular reason or another. I don't know. I'm guessing.
So that's fine. Let's keep that train of thought going. What about the Bosnian pyramid? Assuming it's a pyramid, right? Let's assume for the conversation that it's been vetted it's a pyramid.
Right.
So they didn't want anybody in that pyramid for a while either. Assumedly for the same reasons.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm pretty sure he came out, like their leader came out and said that.
Okay.
That it was private, it's their own. But now it's like a tour site. Like you can go and look at it, and people do, like, there's YouTube videos you can go where people are experiencing weird things.
Right.
There have been people who've gone in with chronic pain and come out without it.
Yeah, I mean, I really cannot answer why or why not. But, but I can say one thing. I can theorize one thing. The same thing happened with the the first tomb of the first emperor. So, and what I mean by that is there was a huge undertaking and excavation where you see the terracotta warriors. We see a lot of stuff that got excavated, but a lot of it's still there, and they've stopped excavating. And I think primarily, to be honest, they just didn't care. Or let me rephrase that. That's very insensitive of me. They just didn't care enough to spend the resources and time because they're busy with other things politically and just how do you say mentally. Their focus is in different areas. So maybe. And this is, again, just theorizing, maybe for the whole idea of just trying to say, no, we do not want anybody to pry here. We just want this to be, low-key. Who cares? Just keep going. Nothing to see here. Move along. Something like that. I really don't know why. But for the rest of everybody and for the narrative of history, and this is something that comes into importance in the reason of every culture has its own dark past. And we know that China has a very dark past, such Russia, and something we haven't even talked about. There's even some very peculiar structures in the Ural Mountains and different parts of Russia. So there's a lot of really weird things around the world that tie into this whole pyramid scenario. But primarily, something that's really, really important is back to this Rashid al-Mamun. Yeah. So, dude, this guy, 9th century, whole hell of a long time ago, he was there for a long time with a great group of people. They had, it was so hard to dig that they had to use vinegar and like very precise tools to take away the casing stones, and they kept going. And this was all based on a legend, man. So they found the entrance, the real entrance. So if some, for the listeners, if they don't know, there's a place in the middle of the Great Pyramid which you can actually enter, which is where you enter in towards the shaft, to where you pass the I forgot the name. Anyways, it's the entrance.
A lot of people think that the entrance is on the base of it. It's not. It's like several, like a story or so up. Yeah.
So that's this guy discovered, man. He's the guy who dug that out. He's the guy who actually found that. So he is the person that first came in towards the Pyramid of Egypt. That guy. So Rashid al-Mamun and his workers stayed there for a very long time until they were able to break through. They actually found, as this legend said, the entrance. They went in through the entrance. They found everything. And to their unfortunate, and here's where it kind of titter-tatters towards ego, because I think because of the whole undertaking, they started making up lies. Because they talked about some magical stuff that was there when there was really nothing there. They talked about bones and stuff that were there when there was nothing really there. So a lot of these Egyptology, and the reason I was talking about is back to Egyptology. This Rashid al-Mamun mentioned that there was bones inside of that sarcophagus-looking thing inside of the king's chamber. Okay. If you ever see the sarcophagus, it's so small. It's infinitesimally small when you compare it to anything inside of in the Valley of the Kings. I mean, these guys, man, talking about sarcophagus, they did a really, really good job when they were building a tomb. And, they were not, they were very ornate. They had a tomb on the tomb, and they had the sarcophagus. They had two covers. I mean, not what you see there. So what these guys said, that they had a lid, right? So they mentioned that they had a lid. They removed the lid. Inside of the lid, Rashid al-Mamun said in the writings that they had found something, and what they found is that's where the legend comes in. A bunch of stuff that just doesn't sound real, to be honest, because most of it just didn't even make sense. Nothing was like fantastical or tying to any of the mystery schools. It was just He was trying to make it up so that people weren't like, you spend all that money to find nothing, you know what I mean? But they did find some stones that were probably used to see whether or not a surface was straight. And that was it. I mean, pretty much everything else was empty. So if it was an actual tomb, this guy would have found something. And this is tying back to the Egyptologists. They're the ones who found tombs. They're the ones who found Tutankhamun. They're the ones who found all these different tombs across the Valley of the Kings. They know what they're filled with. They're completely filled to the brim. And we're talking about a guy who had to spend months digging in order to break the pyramid and get in there. If that guy didn't find anything, really? Was that a tomb? Come on.
No,
you get what I mean?
No, absolutely.
So I just don't buy it.
I think to myself, and this is going back to the question and just kind of glancing on it, I think of Zahi was, and I think, why, other than saying something simple like his government told him he had to do it, what has he got to hide? Like, it's
easy. Well, that's easy, man. I know exactly why. So they are very, 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 very protective of the idea of the creators of the grandiose city and civilization of Egypt. For them, it's ego, man. They have a huge ego on, like, they do not want to say this was not made by their culture or their ancestors.
I guess that makes sense.
And you can see that, man. It bleeds, especially from that guy.
Yeah, I won't say that I have no ego, but what I will say is that my ego is not big enough to stop millions of people from knowing a truth.
Yeah, man.
Even if the truth's about me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's... I don't know, but
think about it. That would discredit everything, right? For them, he believes that these great magicians or creators of all this beautiful architecture and mysteries was his ancestors, you know?
Well, let me ask you, what do you think the purpose of the pyramids was?
So, if anything, I think when I was a little younger, I read some of the books and that you were referring to, and I think still to this day, most of me thinks it might have been something that generates or stores power. But now lately, after reading a lot of the stuff that pertains to our other shows, I think that it might have been something more in the treasure of knowledge than anything else. So if anything, I think that they're a gargantuan treasure of knowledge. And what I mean by that is, in the construction itself, the way it's laid out, and Randall Carson, you know about Randall Carson. He has a lot of information on this, so I definitely recommend the listeners to check out Randall Carson, Sacred Geometry, and how that attributes to information that can be learned from the Pyramid of Giza, particularly the Great Pyramid.
It's really, really thick stuff, though. Right?
It is, but what I mean is, if anything, that's probably one of the biggest cornerstones of what, in my mind, they could be for. Because if you think about it, what is the Great Pyramid? It's a structure that cannot be removed. It's a structure that's going to be there for the next 10,000 years.
Maybe.
I mean, realistically, the way it was built in such a way that it might, or, I mean, obviously it should withstand catastrophes.
Well, I mean, the biggest catastrophe it won't be able to sustain, and that's people.
Well, I don't mean maybe.
So, let me ask you another question, a loaded question.
Okay.
Who built it?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so I do not believe that they were built by Khufu. I think that is a misnomer. That's completely wrong. I do not believe the narrative that we know, that most of us know. I believe that they're probably much older. I believe if
you say much older, what do you mean?
I believe they are probably 15,000 years older than what we actually attribute them to be, and that's a very substantial claim on my part.
No, I understand, and I'm going to clarify for some of our people what I think you just said after I let you finish.
Okay, so the reason I think that is because this ties into another topic we're going to talk soon. I believe that a lot of this stems from an older civilization, a mother civilization.
That's exactly where I thought you were going.
Yeah.
So I'm in the same thought process. The pyramids were not built by Egyptians. No.
Unfortunately,
it's very clear that when the pyramids were created, much like the Sphinx, the area was not all sand. Mm-hmm. It was very different.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's okay, so that's a very good point. And even the Sphinx itself is another topic we should tackle by itself. It's just insane.
That's a huge ordeal.
Yeah, but I agree 100%, man. I mean, I honestly think that if once we go down this path, we're going to realize that slowly but surely things are going to reveal themselves to show that they're much older. And now recently, there's been a place in Micronesia, or it's close to the Philippines, sorry, it's called Gunung Padang. So Gunung Padang might just be the oldest, quote unquote, the oldest pyramid of the planet. And so this structure was discovered by I think he was a geologist or an archaeologist local to the area. Graham Hancock visited. In his own words, he believes that it's probably the oldest pyramidal structure on the planet. It's very ornate. A lot of it's underwater now because of the rising, basically because of where the actual groundwater was. And from the original estimates, it might just be 15 or 13,000 years old. So again, I think the more time goes by, the newer technologies that we're utilizing, like there's a new technology called astroarchaeology, or a new field, astroarchaeology, that utilizes satellites to be able to look at 10 to 20 meters down below the sand,
sure.
And also below the tree brush and the canopies. And
it's a variation of GPR,
yeah,
penetrating radar.
Yep,
I've heard of it actually.
So I think with the new technologies that are coming out, and with the ability to just have a grander scale and just a much more higher resolution of observation, we're going to start seeing that they're going to start dating much, much older than we originally tied them to be. And I think at that point, this narrative that we hold to be true is going to break apart, and we're going to have to rewrite history as we know it.
So I had no idea when you said Gunung Padang, and I probably butchered the pronunciation.
I mean, so did I.
No, you I don't know, that your rolling of your R's is much better than me. But I had to look it up while you were talking, just to see what it was. I've never heard of it. Mm-hmm. And it says, on October 1st in 2014, surveyors halted excavation activities temporarily due to the following facts. One, there is a large structure below the surface that they can see. Mm-hmm. A core zone site has been confirmed. There are many man-made artifacts that have been discovered. The construction of the site spans 4 separate eras. There's also a recommendation that was made to extend the survey for conservation and management, etc., etc. But in 2014, towards the end of 2014, the excavation was criticized for being improperly conducted. It is also known Gunung Padang was originally a volcano. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either. Around 10,000 years ago, possibly even as far back as 20,000 BC, were the initial changes made to the hill. Now, this is interesting because, as far as I knew,
Göbekli
Tepe was the oldest at like 11, almost 12,000, right?
Right.
So this is interesting. As far back as 20,000 BC, modifications to this hill started. 9,000 years ago, somebody began the construction and wrapped it in andesite columns. 7,000 years ago, somebody renovated once more and added parallel layers of stone columns. And then 3,000 years ago, somebody covered it in soil, as in to hide it.
Yeah, to protect it.
Just like Göbekli.
Yeah, man. So isn't that amazing?
Bizarre.
Yeah.
It's totally, I mean, it's not a pyramid, but it's still bizarre.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I thought
no, it's megalithic.
Okay.
But no, it's incredibly interesting. I've officially learned something from you today. So I'm always appreciative of that.
Yeah.
But, so...
What about you, man? So what, if, to hit the question back, to kick the question back to you, what do you think, what do you think it was for?
I won't, what do I think it was for? Like I said,
energy?
I think it was for energy. It just seems, and I will be the first one to admit that sounds like a fantasy novel.
No, but I understand why. There's some, even if it's circumstantial or conjecture, there's at least a musing of something there.
Yeah, realistically, I'm open to the, science changes all the time.
Of course.
We see new things here, we see new things there.
Yeah.
As it stands right now, I think the evidence points to being some sort of energy generator. I saw, you and I shared an article together where we saw that the most recent study of Giza, people went in with these these electrical devices and discovered that the pyramid itself at the base takes whatever electric source that you have and magnifies it, so that by the time you get to the top, its power's higher. So, to me, there's no other structure on Earth that does that.
Yeah, and especially...
At least not I mean, you could say the Tesla coil does that.
No, but
it clearly does.
But not naturally.
Not that size, not that scope.
And not naturally. That's
and
not
again,
the right word.
well, I know what you mean by naturally.
Yeah.
There's no, as far as we know, there's I recently remember something about there being a hidden chamber that we're not allowed to look at.
Right.
It's like it's under the King's Chamber. Or the
so there's a huge one. There's one that's supposed.
Massive,
There's the Grand Gallery. That's the name.
You're right.
So there's one that's bigger than the Grand Gallery, and no, it's again back to the ego part, right? I think a lot of it is because even though Saheo Waz is no longer the Minister of Antiquities, the person who's currently the Minister of Antiquities, and the people that are trying to protect, quote unquote, the history of Egypt, have been very close-minded about exploring pretty much anything and everything. And there's more to it, not just that. I don't know if you knew this. There's a gargantuan amount of tunnels underneath the Great Pyramid, and there's a lot of things that we've unfortunately been not allowed to look at. There's one documentary that happened in the 90s about the underground passages inside of the pyramid structure and the pyramid complex.
I remember.
And that was it.
I remember.
And after that, they didn't speak of it.
Yep. I also know that massive network of tunnels that we're not allowed into.
Yeah.
You and I had talked about that documentary, about how they go into the tunnels, and the cinematography is so terrible that you have to say, what were you even trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you weren't, and that's kind of the point. But
look at your feet. Oh, look at that.
Not only is there a massive network of tunnels underneath the pyramids, but there's also a massive network of tunnels underneath the place I've now said 7 times correctly.
Yes.
Teotihuacan.
Yeah.
I did it again.
Yeah, you did say it perfectly. And you know what? There's also there a bunch. And this was recently found. Mercury, an insane amount of mercury.
Because they had I won't say it was like religious, but they had a lot of faith in it.
Man,
like
So
there's a meme going around that's like, so you have like particles in your blood, you should do cocaine about it. It's funny, right? It's because it's talking about old timey doctors.
Yeah.
But for the folks at that place, the tequila place,
tequila Mockingbird.
Yeah, that was their cocaine. It was mercury. Like they took it intravenously. They drank it.
Insane,
they ate it.
right?
I mean, there's a reason they're dead.
Well,
that's all I'm gonna say is
there's a lot of.
It's probably tacos and mercury.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that area. There was a huge. So the reason the Teotihuacan people were so rich because that took a lot of resources to build, and they had a huge vein of obsidian, and obsidian glass was something that was basically found in it was plentiful in that area, and that made the Teotihuacan people extremely rich at the time of the building of the Teotihuacan complex. But the mercury, the reason I think it's very interesting is because that ties into a lot of the mystery school elements, especially when you tie back it to the Philosopher's Stone. Philosophical mercury. So mercury is something that's, if you go down the mystery school, if you go down the path of enlightenment or the radical knowledge thing, you will find that it's incredibly important. And something that is tied into...
About mercury specifically?
Mercury specifically, yeah. It's something that's also found, supposedly, in the first emperor's tomb in China.
Like in massive quantities.
In massive quantities,
a whole drum. Is that from a... I must have seen it in a documentary or something, because I wanted to say that's from a movie.
Well, there's movies that talk about it, but supposedly there's a complete scale model of the kingdom of when the first emperor ruled, and the entire water, instead of being water, is mercury. But there's not just that. There's more. Is
that from a... But
that's from there's a documentary that talks about it.
We must have seen the same documentary.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was documentary or movie.
There's a documentary.
It seems fantastic enough to be a movie.
Yeah, I know, right?
So,
and how
Indiana Jones and the River of Mercury.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're wrong. You're not wrong.
Well, let me segue just a segment or segment. Let me segue just a moment and ask one of the primary questions that everybody asks is, how were they built? Obviously, it's 20,000 slaves moving 1 block a minute. The easy.
Can I segue from a segue to a segue?
Do you have a segue?
I have a segue.
Okay.
All right. So not the ones you write on though. Okay. So check this out. I believe, and this is gonna be radical, but I'm gonna say it anyways. So down the path of mystery, right? It leads you to one thing: that ancient civilization, and that leads you to something that we've talked about before. A power or a knowledge that lies within ourselves, right? Vril, as it were. So if you go back to the ancient schools of mysteries, if you go back to the time of quote-unquote the Atlanteans, they believed that they had the power in themselves to be able to do anything and everything.
Sure.
So I think, if anything, if this was built with a higher knowledge of a different technology that we do not yet understand and see it as magic, then maybe it was that. But I don't think it was aliens.
I also do not think. As a kid, I thought aliens.
Me too, yeah.
As a kid, I never believed that slaves, even though I grew up having to watch things like The Greatest Story Ever Told and the Ten Commandments, I never once believed that was the case. I don't know why.
Yeah, me neither.
But, I don't know. I think that's interesting. So, no, I don't. I think this has realistically nothing to do with aliens.
I agree 100%. I think it was an ancient civilization.
Sorry, George Tsoukalos.
Yeah, man, it's not aliens, bro.
It's Mexicans. No, I'm totally
kidding. Man. Well, they definitely had a part.
Why did you take offense? You're not Mexican.
No, I'm just... No, I'm not.
I mean, obviously you didn't take offense, but you were hey, man.
No, I was just going to say, they probably took a part. I mean, that's what I mean. I was
okay.
Not the offense. It's just they probably had a part of the Teotihuacan tequila place.
So, the tequila place. Well, I mean, that is Mexico, right?
That's what I mean. That's literally in Mexico City.
For the listeners, just to be clear, I tease Joe sometimes about being Mexican, even though he's not.
Yeah.
He's clearly Puerto Rican, but there's a guy we work with who we're going to have on the show at some point.
Yeah.
And he is Venezuelan, and I also call him Mexican. It's not meant to be disrespectful.
Man.
I'm not disrespectful to people I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm disrespectful to people I know, and
I'm fine.
It's weird. Like,
yeah, man.
If I'm I don't want to say rude, but like quasi insulting. It's just my way of trying to
I have a sense of humor, man. I have a sense of humor. You're not triggering anybody, man. Come on.
I probably am triggering somebody.
I mean, but come on. That's if you don't have a sense of humor, that's your fault. It's I understand.
I mean, is it though?
Yeah,
but you know what? That's not a conversation.
Different conversation.
That's a great conversation. But, it can wait. So, no, I think.
So Vril, I think Vril built it.
The Vril?
No, I mean like the energy.
Oh, okay. I thought you
Not. So what I mean to say,
Nazis that built
no.
it. Got it.
So what I mean to say by it is a technology that we do not yet know, and it might just lie within ourselves.
So I can't remember the guy's name. He's a pretty interesting guy to listen to. He focuses on sound. Do you know the
Michael
guy?
Tellinger?
That's the guy, Tellinger.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, you're filled with useless knowledge.
No, he's right.
It's helpful. Yeah.
Dude, Tesla said it, man. If you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yep.
And what is sound?
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. But no, he has the theory that I'm not sure if I'm being 100% accurate here, but he said that I was going to say Egyptians, I'll just paraphrase.
Yeah.
Whoever built it used sound to raise the blocks and to size them and everything.
Right.
And like you said, to me that's a technology that's so foreign that it's magic.
Exactly. Like if anything, it's something that we knew and we lost it, and now because we can't conceive of a way our modern society can't do, we just chalk it up to aliens or chalk it up to something that makes no sense or chalk it up to something that's superfluous and completely abstract, because honestly, we are so, I hate to say it, but in other words, the ego that makes up our culture is so grand that we can't allow ourselves to think that there was a civilization that was much more advanced in some ways than we are.
You know, I said earlier that I don't really consider myself to have a big ego, but I have been talking to a couple of people who, when I have discussions, and it's just people in passing, not people who sit down for intellectual conversations, but people will come up to me and be like, hey, I heard podcast X, and just want to tell you you're wrong, it's blah.
Yeah.
And sometimes my natural thought process is to argue my side of it.
Yeah.
And just, they say theirs and then I say mine and we have a discussion. Inevitably, they end up thinking that I am being obtuse on purpose. Mm-hmm. And recently, I've been talking to a couple of people about some topics that I don't normally enjoy.
Yeah.
And we can have a whole podcast on that if we wanted to. It's so vast.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And I found myself maybe finally breaking past the point of ego and finally hearing, like really hearing things that I hadn't wanted to hear, maybe.
I get what you mean, yeah.
And I think this topic of pyramids, a lot of people are going to hear what we've said, and it's going to be the same way. They're going to say, no, We grew up in school.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the fellas that I'm thinking about right now, I know he's one of those people where he says, when I was in school, they taught me X plus X equals 2X.
Yeah.
And that's always what it's going to be.
Yeah.
He is one of the people I've been talking to lately who's shown some light on some things for me.
Yeah.
If he heard this, he would say, no, pyramids were built as tombs. They were built by Egyptian slaves.
I'd love to sit down and talk with that person.
I would too. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. So I'm going to see if I can get him to come up here for one of our shows.
It'd be great. But the reason I say it is because I think this type of conversation, once, like you said, you eliminate the ego, you can learn a lot from people, Yeah. And I am in no way, shape, or form saying that I am 100% right in everything that I'm saying. Yeah. I'm just saying one thing's for sure. There's a lot of things that we've been told that are, unfortunately,
potentially far off.
Some not just potentially. I think some of it just blatantly so.
No, I agree, but we, one thing I would love to do is I would love for somebody to come to me and say, Bo, you think that, for example, you think the Bosnian pyramid is magical. I've never said that. Yeah. I was recounting stories that some other people have said. I would like for somebody to come, you know what, you want to go see it? Let's go see it. I would love to be able to experience some of these places firsthand and then come back and be like, all right, people, let me tell you. Yeah. This is what I have.
This is gobbledygook.
Right. So, right now, I don't want to say we're like armchair quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, no, but I get it. Yeah, I get it, of course. So, we're learning across pages, and basically that's it.
Right.
Pages and musings and images and yeah, I get it. And you're right. And that's the next step. And I agree. And that's one of the things I've always wanted to do. So absolutely, we should have that in our queue of things to do. Absolutely. We should travel to these places.
Absolutely.
And we should have more of a live view. And not only that, but it gives us the ability to have much more of a better understanding of some of the topics that we're talking about. But hey, that person that you're referring to, I would love to have a discussion with them about all this stuff.
Well, I know I mentioned to him possibly coming onto the podcast at some point. He is a teacher of sorts.
Okay.
And like I said, he's easily one of the smartest guys I've ever talked to.
Nice, man.
And he's one of those guys that when he gets a book, he just flips through it page by page, like casually, and then sets it down. He's like, all right, I got it.
Right.
And it used to piss me off so bad because like I'm such a cinephile that when I read a book, like it all plays out in my head like a movie. So I read probably slower than your average person. Not because of the content, but because of how my brain processes
visual,
it, makes it very cerebral.
Yeah.
We're coming towards the end of our hour, so I'm going to give you a chance to see if you have any hypotheticals you want to throw out.
Okay. So hypothetically, if this was something, the entire nature of why and how they were built, in my mind, from what I've read. And irregardless of all the documentation, research, scientific exploration, engineering, like theories and hypotheses and all this stuff because there's a lot, man. There's been like every other year, every other 10 years, there's a person that says, oh, it was built this way. They used water channels and they used the lowering of the Nile with blah, 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 blah. There's a lot. But nobody really does have an answer. And you see a bunch of magazines and a bunch of these clickbait articles that say, no, it's been proven. It hasn't. No. So for anybody or anyone that believes that there's been something that has been completely and utterly explained, it is not.
I agree.
Well,
no, there's one thing that has been explained, and that is that they did not use bronze saws to make it.
That's a good point.
They have tried so hard to make that happen.
Yeah.
Was it bronze chisels and saws?
Yeah.
That has been proven beyond the shadow of a doubt does not work.
Right. And for me, the biggest misnomers are the time. 20 years is a hell of a short amount of time to be able to construct the Great Pyramid. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, if you have 1 billion slaves...
realistically, think about the undertaking of just moving the amount of stones that they had to move, and some of the stones where they come from. It just doesn't make any sense. So, apart from that, my hypothesis in the nature of all this thing goes back again to some of the stuff that you learn from just myths and legends, and I believe that a lot of it comes from a hidden or absent truth that we've lost. And I think all of this was built with a purpose, And the purpose that was behind all of this is knowledge. And the reason why it was built was in order for a civilization with amnesia to be able to relearn things that were of great importance. Because as I said at the beginning of this podcast, an undertaking of such scale and magnitude that is not just in Egypt, but everywhere on Earth, must have a purpose. Because nothing like that would just be done for a person. I mean, nothing. I mean, there is no such place in the world that has been constructed at such a grand scale for just one person.
What about the mausoleum?
There's a lot of different places, but not at the scale of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
I mean, nothing is quite that scale.
Or Teotihuacan.
Even the mausoleum, and I can't remember the guy's name right now. He built the mausoleum for his wife, and it's enormous. It was one of the original 7 wonders of the world.
Yeah, and even the again, back to the first emperor's tomb, it's gargantuan. Yeah. The undertaking is amazing. But even that, in my mind at least, is a much less undertaking than the creation of the Great Pyramid. I mean, it's just, there has to be a more important reason. And again, that's my opinion. And my hypothesis is that it was a way of carrying information towards a new generation of people.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it strikes me as unusual that a people, like, I don't make these podcasts with you so that people 20 years down the way hear them and go, oh, now I understand.
Yeah.
I do it because I find it interesting. I have my doubts sometimes about the longevity of humankind, but
yeah.
It's not something I'm actively pursuing the preservation of information.
Yeah.
So it strikes me as unusual that your thought process is that somebody made these so that future generations could have knowledge. Not only do we have no knowledge from it at this point, possibly ever.
Yeah.
But why would they have done that? Like,
well,
that's pre-Younger Dryas we're talking about.
So this ties into a lot of things that have to do with astronomy and astrology. The people back then were obsessed with astronomy and astrology because of things that happened. And what I mean by things is...
you were going to say because they had nothing else to do.
No, because of the catastrophes that occurred. So I think something that we've going to learn in future podcasts is the effects of the Great Flood, what happened, the new evidence, because there's new evidence. There's recently been a new crater that was found in Greenland.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
So potentially yep.
Yeah, so there's a lot of new evidence that ties in, again, back to the idea of a great flood. But what I'm trying to say is they were obsessed with the studies of the stars. And a lot of some of the more serious people believe that there was a observatory, so that the pyramid complex was an observatory. Heliopolis and Leptopolis, there's two different temples. Heliopolis is off to the left. Leptopolis is down to the center. They make a perfect triangle. And apparently, there's a theory that states that they were made to be observatory. So one of the most precise observatories of that specific time. So again, there's different theories. I think those are probably a little bit more towards the line of what you were saying. What's the point? Maybe the knowledge of the stars, because there's also the Rover Bobal's mystery of Orion mystery, which states that they were mapped to the celestial constellation of Orion.
Yeah, the belt of Orion. Well, we have exceeded our hour.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we want to close it down, but. For the folks listening at home, we want to say thanks for joining us. Mm-hmm. As always, you guys can feel free to comment down below any comments you have or questions, ideas for future shows. If you got something you want to share privately, you can send us an email at boandjoepodcast@gmail.com. And as always, I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And we will see you next time.